Hi everybody, welcome to Club Chair Conversations with Troy Rafferty, the People's Voice. We're so excited that we can share his stories about who he is and how he became a very renowned trial lawyer, really prolific, one of the most prolific trial lawyers of our time. And his mission with the People's Voice Initiative is to really share his stories and experiences with other lawyers and engage everybody. We really want you to follow this, and I think you're all going to enjoy watching this journey and really listening to who he is. So thanks for joining us here. And I want to just start with your younger years, Troy, and really talk about how you became who you are today. I know you had a lot of interesting jobs, and if you could tell us about your journey when you were younger, growing up in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and the different jobs you had. Everybody wants to hear about you doing regular people jobs.
People jobs?
People jobs.
Yes, and just so everybody knows, yes, there really is a Kalamazoo. Of course, a lot of people don't realize it was a fictional place in a children's book, but there is really a Kalamazoo. But yeah, I've had a ton of jobs. I started working when I was about 10. Had a great job. Had I didn't know it was a job. I didn't even know they were going to pay me, but they paid me to go out to the Kalamazoo Speedway, the sand drags, and I got to stand there with a shovel. And after they all started, they took off at the start, I'd run out there and I'd fill in the holes so that the next two cars could come up and race. And then they paid me $20 at the end of the day, and I was like, seriously? So that was probably one of my favorite jobs. I've had some other really bad jobs. I worked at a sausage factory for a long time. My job was probably the most important job that I think people would appreciate, and that is I would have to scoop out the pig intestine and squeeze out and make sure that the balls of poop were out of it. And so, but I think people appreciate that. Like, I thought that was an important job. You don't want your sausage with any poop in it.
It's so funny because I don't think people would ever imagine that you had these menial jobs.
That's all I had. In Michigan, there was also a law that basically when you bought like a can of soda or beer or anything else, you had to pay a 10-cent deposit for it, and then you could return it to almost any store, and they would pay you 10 cents per can. My job at this little country market that I worked at was to sort the cans. And let me tell you, people put weird stuff in cans before they bring it. So my job was to dig through bags and sort the cans and wash them so that when they came and picked them up, the distributors came and picked them up, they were sorted and cleaned.
How do you think those types of jobs prepared you for what you're doing now?
Well, I think it gives you a perspective. I think that's the main thing. It's a perspective. It's a perspective of, understanding what a hard day's work is. It gives you a work ethic. It reminds you of the way you should be in terms of working, in terms of work ethic, and it gives you a perspective. And quite frankly, it motivated me to want to be. I didn't want to sort cans. I didn't want to squeeze poop out of intestines. So it gave me motivation also, motivation to do something.
And then after those jobs, I know you worked at Sears and you had a sales job. And yes. If you could just explain to everybody what you did at Sears and how those sales skills have helped you as a trial lawyer.
Yeah, this is going back a while, but when I started working, I was working as a busboy at Bill Knapp's, for anybody who knows what Bill Knapp's is anymore. But Bill Knapp's was an old, is a diner, kind of like a Bob Evans type thing. And I was working there, and I got a call because I had applied for a sales job in the sporting goods department at Sears, and they called and offered me the job, and I was like, got it, taking it. So I started selling bikes at Sears, and one of the things I'll never forget, so the store manager, Mr. Cashman, he always dressed impeccably in these suits, and he drove a what was it? What were those old cars? RX-7, sports car. And I always thought that was the coolest thing ever. And so he walked by, and as he was walking by, I said hello to him. And he didn't know me from I mean, I was a 16-year-old kid, just started there selling bikes. And but he stopped and he was talking to me. He said, "Well, wait a minute, didn't you have the highest sales rate last month for the extended warranties on the bikes?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Oh, well, great job, good work." And I said, "Well, wait a minute." I said, "If I do it again next month, will you move me over to office supplies?" Because in office, the typewriters and all that kind of stuff was a commission job. I said, "If you'd move me over there, sporting goods was just, I got my hourly rate." And he said, "I'll tell you what, you be the highest producer again next month, and I'll move you to office supplies." And I said, "Okay." And so I did, and to his credit, he came down personally, which was a big deal for me because he was like, he was like this, bigwig. And he came down and he said, "You did it. You now have an off. You now have a job." And so I started selling typewriters because back then there were still typewriters.
So the persuasive skills that you use as a trial attorney, it sounds like those were formed at a really young age, and you knew internally that. So I'd like you to just talk a little bit about the sales or persuasive skills that are necessary in your profession, and how do you think that's innate, or can somebody learn those skills?
Well, I think in certain people they're innate. Okay, my father, he had the innate skill. I mean, he could, as they say, sell ice to an Eskimo. I mean, he just had that ability. I mean, it used to drive me nuts waiting in line at the bank with him, because he would turn around and he'd start trying to sell the person behind us whatever he was selling. And he talked to everybody. And so I think it's a combination of both, but you can definitely learn it. You just have to not be afraid of it. And that to me is the key. You have to be able to stop Mr. Cashman and say, "Hey," not be obnoxious, not be arrogant, but just say, "Hey," and take a chance and not be afraid.
Are you nervous in those moments when you were back then, or did you feel this inner confidence from a young age? Or is that because everybody sees you now and you're so confident, and I think younger people deciding what they want to do in their careers want to understand, do I have what it takes to be a trial attorney? What is the grit or the necessary elements that it takes to get there?
I think if you ever stop being nervous, then you need to recheck yourself, because you should be nervous. I don't mean quivering nervous. I don't mean like, but I mean, you should have, just like in a trial. I'm nervous when I walk into courtroom and I sit down and I'm waiting for the judge to say, "Mr. Rafferty, your opening statement." But once I stand up, it disappears. And it's kind of like that even back at an early age. Okay, when I'm walking into or when I've got a customer coming up at Sears and I'm trying to sell them, a typewriter, it's like, okay, I gotta figure out how to do this, and I gotta work on it, and then all of a sudden you start talking to them, and then all of a sudden it becomes easier. It's just like everything. The more you do something, the more confident you get, and the easier it becomes. And so I think that's the key.
Who was the client who had the biggest impact on you, and why? That's a question people ask when they know I know you. And if you could just tell us about the client who's had the biggest impact on you.
The client that had the biggest impact on me, that's an interesting question, because honestly, all of my clients have a big impact on me, because you get so close to people doing what we do as trial lawyers. You get to know them, you get to know their families, you are in their homes, you become very close. So they all have an impact, but one in particular that was very impactful to me and gave me a real perspective on what it means to be a trial lawyer was a gentleman I tried a case for, and he had a horrific injury. I won't go into all the injuries, but he had a horrific injury, and very badly hurt. But I was walking into court. I'd been trying the case for, I don't know, 7 or 8 days, and we were walking into court for me to give my closing argument, and I had noticed throughout the trial that he had kept, him and his son were wearing these lapel pins. And I asked him, as we were walking into the courtroom, what is it? You know, what's the significance of the lapel pins? And he said, well, they're my mother's hummingbird earrings. And he told me the story. He said, my mother passed away about a month before the trial, and she loved hummingbirds. And she, after she passed away, sorry, it's a, you know, it was a very emotional story he told, and he said, you know, that there was a hummingbird that flew in a couple weeks before the trial, before he came to Pensacola, and it flew into his workshop, and he built a nest for it, and it would come in every day, and he thought it was a symbol of his mother. And so he was getting ready, and him and his wife and family were packing up to come to Pensacola for the trial, and he opened up a drawer, and these earrings fell out, and they were hummingbird earrings. And so he saw that as a symbol. He said, that's her saying, put these on, and I'll watch out over you.
Okay. I see emotion, and I think a lot of people feel that trial lawyers are very cold and emotionless, and that in order to be a good trial lawyer, you need to be devoid of some of that. But with you and the other great trial attorneys I know that they have a lot of emotion. Could you speak to the element of emotion and how you don't become hardened seeing some of the things that you've seen in our, you know, society, and how you still at this stage in your career are able to harness that emotion to help your clients?
Well, I say this all the time in a lot of the presentations I give and when I'm talking to the young lawyers. If you don't feel emotion, then you should probably find something else to do. It's something that you can't, like, when just talking about that the hummingbird client, for example. I mean, I still tear up and cry when I think about him. I still tear up when I'm talking to a jury and I'm talking about what the client's been through, about the nightmares that they live with, and anger, not just emotion for or sympathy for your client, but anger towards what the defendant did. You know, I try a lot of pharmaceutical cases, and some of the, you know, the conduct that's been engaged in by the opioid manufacturers, by the tobacco companies, by big pharma, all these companies is horrendous. And if you're not angry about it, and if you're not upset about it, and if you don't feel the compassion for your clients, you're never going to be successful. You have to figure out how to get that. And it's something that just comes from within.
Is that a skill that you think someone could teach? Or do you think it just the person themselves has that level of depth? Because you don't see this with everybody. You see a lot of, you know, lawyers walking around kind of pretending. You're not like that, and some of the greats really, you know that they're more authentic.
And juries know that, not just people. I mean, it's just like in every aspect of your life. If you're sitting there and you're talking to somebody at a dinner party, even if you're not a trial lawyer, and if you're sitting at a dinner party, you know when somebody's being fake to you, when somebody's trying to be somebody who they're not, or whether they're being authentic. And that's what you have to be. You have to be authentic. So I don't know that you can teach authenticity. I think you have to harness it more than teach it. You have to harness it, and you have to embrace it. And that's why I tell people all the time, I am emotional in trial, okay? I don't hide my emotions. And I don't hide my emotions in my real life. By real life, I mean my pride, you know, outside the courtroom. I just don't. I say what's on my mind. I tear up, I get emotional when I'm talking to somebody, or if I'm in a, you know, it's something that you have to harness more than teach.
Did you, were there any courses that you've taken over the course of your career that helped you dig deep like that to be able to be vulnerable? So it's also vulnerability, right? I feel like with you, it's vulnerability and emotion. So it's that depth of substance of who you are.
No, you know what? I haven't taken any courses that I think would do that, other than, Bible study. Talking. I spend a lot of time talking to different pastors, different priests, different spiritual leaders, because it gives you, I always say, you have to take a couple hours every week and sit and remember that there's other things out there bigger than you and bigger than whatever problems you're experiencing. And you have to focus on that and say, you know what, let's focus on, and that's when, that also motivates you to then to go help people and go try to do something nice and go try to help,
And finding those moments of quiet in such a busy life, is that something, I'm sure people will say, well, I wake up and I've got, kids and craziness and my schedule and I'm late for work and I'm running in an office. How do you recommend carving that time out? Is that something you calendar, or it just happens organically?
No, I don't calendar it. I wake up early. I wake up before the sun comes up because I like to watch sunrises. I like to sit out and reflect. It's a good time. I also, one of the things that I do is I leave Post-it notes like near my bed, whether it's, motivation to work, whether it's motivation to reflect and say, listen, for example, if I'm getting ready to try a case, I say, I'll leave a note that says, get up, the enemy is sleeping. And so, that motivates you when you see that to get up and do something. Same, sometimes when I know I need to slow down a little bit and I need to reflect on things, I'll leave that note next to my bed. And so that's something to remind you, because it's so easy, just like anything. It's so easy to just say, I don't have time. I've got this deposition I got to get ready for. I got this trial. I got this client I got to meet with. I got to go. Sometimes you have to slow it down and do little things. Like one of the things I also do is that helps me is changing things up, not having the same routine every morning. Like even little things, like I'll take a different route to work. I mean, and it triggers, you see different things, and it's like, oh, I didn't even know that house was, wow, they really built that fast. Otherwise, you never see it, and you see the same thing. Never drink out of the same coffee cup every day. Change things up.
It's interesting because there's studies, there's books out there now about habits and forming habits. And what I find so interesting in what you're saying is the idea your brain then could become so just accustomed to those habits, where you're saying change it up. I love change it up.
Change it up.
I think that's so healthy for our brains as we're aging too.
Well, and I think, but I think, I think the important aspect of it is it doesn't have to be big things. You don't have to decide, I'm going to go on a trip to Tibet, to change it up. It can be driving a different route to work. It can be going to, instead of, just grabbing a cup of coffee and getting to the office, stopping at a cafe or stopping at a diner and saying hello to the waitresses or the waiters, having a cup of coffee, eating, and then that changes it up, and it sparks creativity. That's what the other important aspect of it is. If you get mundane, if you get in the same routine constantly, you lose a level of creativity, and you have to. That helps trigger things, and you go, oh, I see things from a different angle now, and you can go in.
Spontaneity, very important. I'm learning a lot. Changing it up, that's very important. And I think also being so present in the moment, because I think any busy professional, any busy person in life can get so caught up in their own head that they walk into that cafe and they don't say hello to the person behind the counter because their phone's buzzing, they're not focused. But the fact that you're meeting people in the real world.
That's what everybody does now. That's what everybody does now.
And I know that phone is blowing up for you. And so to me also, if you're so reactive, instead of being proactive in putting that phone away and looking at people in the eyes and engaging, to me, that also builds your character and helps you in your work life when you're able to be present in the real world. And I know that you have so many people in Pensacola that you're friendly with in the community, and you're not selective of who, what type of jobs they have. So could you speak to that a little bit?
Well, yeah, you have to be, I guess the phrase, be present in the moment. I mean, that's whether you're dealing with your family, whether you're dealing with friends, whether you're dealing with clients. I absolutely, positively put down my phone when somebody comes in to talk with me. You turn it off, you just put it on silent, you set it over there, because it's a very bad habit, and it's, once again, getting into habits. There are good habits, there are bad habits. This is a bad habit, when somebody's trying to talk to you and you're not even looking at them, and I don't know if they're listening or if they're paying attention, but I tell you this, because there's some things, there's one thing that I always live by, and that is, people may not remember what you say to them, but they will remember how you made them feel. And if you make them feel like you're not paying attention to them, you're insulting, and it's not right. But if you and I have a conversation at a cafe or at a diner, and we're engaged in a conversation, and it's a good conversation, I walk away, I want you to walk away feeling, that was, he was engaged, he was, active in the conversation, he paid attention. Because that's the other thing. I mean, and it's important in the practice of law, and it's important being a trial lawyer to understand and to listen. And people want to tell their story, and they deserve to tell their story. And if you're not paying attention to them, you can't tell their story.
And the details, right? We always say in our company, the devil's in the details. And to me, when you're in your business as well, if you're not focused and really present when your clients are speaking and you're learning about a specific case, you may miss out on one of the biggest threads of the entire case. So I think that's also what helped you become who you are today as a trial attorney.
Yeah, be present, be attentive, care. I mean, really, just care. Okay? I mean, if I'm talking to you, I don't want you sitting there on your phone. I don't want you sitting there looking around to see if there's somebody more interesting to talk to. So it's really about caring too. And yeah, it's very important. And on a law note, it's also very important. For example, I always go to my client's home when I'm talking with them. I don't have them come into my office, and it's not a familiar area for them. It's not comfortable for them. A lot of people are intimidated going into a doctor's office, a lawyer's office, anybody's office. So go to their home and sit and get to know them and understand them and what they've been through. And you'll always pick out certain things. Like, you'll see something like, I was at a client's home one time, we were getting ready, we were in trial, and I was getting her ready for her testimony the next day at her house. And I mean, I saw these photos, all these photos of her son, who unfortunately was in an accident and passed away, but all these just beautiful, beautiful photos. And you could just feel the love that she had for her son. And it really kind of it motivates you, and it gets you fired up and wanting to help.
So as the People's Voice, which we're going to talk a little bit more about the People's Voice initiative and what we're trying to accomplish with engagement for that mission, you're speaking for the people. I keep listening to you and thinking you'd make a great politician, and I'm sure you hear that all the time. Do you have any political aspirations? And if not, why not?
Zero. Zero. Not one iota. No, I think politics, and there's a couple reasons. I mean, I'm actually very active in politics, and we're actively over in Tallahassee and in Washington, D.C. trying to, help the consumer's cause. So I spend a lot of time in politics, but politics for politicians has become so combative, so disjointed, so much conflict. There's no compromise, and everybody's looking for some reason to tear you down. Okay, and it's one of those things where it's like, why can't we just sit down and discuss something? Okay, we did it for centuries. Okay, all the way back to the Roman Empire. In politics, there has been compromise. There is no compromise anymore, zero, and that is a problem. And so I'd rather be behind, talking to the politicians, trying to convince the politicians of this, that, or the other thing for my clients' causes, but I don't have any. I have no intention of being in office. Was
there one defining moment where you knew you wanted to be a lawyer, and if so, what was it, or was it more of a sliding,
I was very fortunate. I'm one of those fortunate people in many ways. I'm very blessed. But one of the ways I was very fortunate was I never wanted to be anything but a trial lawyer. I mean, I don't remember any time in my life where I didn't have that goal, was to go and be a trial lawyer. Now, for a while, I thought I was going to be a criminal defense lawyer, but no, I've always wanted to be a trial lawyer. And I can't say, a lot of people say, oh, I watched this Perry Mason episode, or I watched, To Kill a Mockingbird, and, or whatever, and that really motivated me. Now, I watched all that. I watched every lawyer show there was, but I always wanted to do it. And I can't say there was one particular moment. It was just something that was born in when I, as I grew up.
I did have a defining moment.
What was your defining moment?
And I would like to know your opinion about it. I could cry. See, I have that depth of emotion. I watched my best friend get killed in front of me by a drunk driver. And the driver was an 18-year-old boy whose father was a very powerful lawyer in town. And I went back to college, and they called me in for the jury trial. And I was a witness on the stand, and they ended up getting this drunk kid off with technicalities. And the defense attorney was so powerful and so persuasive, and the prosecuting attorney was a young attorney right out of law school who just didn't know what he was doing. And I sat there in the witness stand feeling so angry and saying, I have to go change the system. But it's so hard, right? Then I decided, after going to law school, I went into the jail and saw what was going on, and I thought, this is not going to be good for me. But I went into the injury practice, helping injured workers and injured people in terrible accidents, thinking at least I could help in that way. But I did have that moment, and I went right back after college and knew right then that I was going to declare my major and go to law school. So it was a pretty powerful moment, sitting in that courtroom and thinking this. And so I guess my question sort of off that is, does it frustrate you when you see some of the lawyering that doesn't reach the level? And how do you feel about that? Because it almost seems unfair that one client who's in a horrific accident would have you as an attorney, and someone else wouldn't get the same representation. And how do you feel about that? And how does that, speak to? I don't know.
It is frustrating when I see it, but I think it's incumbent upon us as trial lawyers. That's why I spend a lot of time teaching. I spend a lot of time mentoring. I spend a lot of time, giving speeches about how to properly do this and how to properly do that. And I think that's one of the things that motivates me, is I see bad lawyering. Listen, there's bad lawyers, there's bad doctors, there's bad real estate agents, there's bad everybody. Every profession has them. But I think for those, because I had great mentors. And I think it's incumbent upon everybody to make sure that we're, continually trying to build up our younger people and surround the profession with skilled advocates.
And so that really leads into this People's Voice initiative. You can see that we have going on, and the idea is to give access to young attorneys who maybe wouldn't have access to ask you the types of questions they want to ask you, or to highlight their cases that they want to share with people. And that was really the idea behind this People's Voice initiative. And we are excited because we're going to get some guests hopefully here to talk a little bit about the People's Voice and tell you their stories, and then have time to ask you questions. Yeah. And also, for everybody who's following us on all the channels, engage with us, please. Troy's on them, and he will answer your questions right there on Facebook, YouTube channel. He will go into Instagram and really engage with you. So it's Troy on there, not a team, even though he does have a few people helping him. He's on that every day and will definitely get back to you. So I would love, and so would your audience, to hear about the case that had the largest impact on you, since we're going to be asking a lot of people what their most impactful case was. We want to hear about yours.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. Everybody thinks, oh, well, because, yeah, I mean, I've been fortunate to work on a lot of really important and big cases because I've been given that opportunity. Opioids, tobacco, you know, all sorts of drug cases, and there's some others, sexual harassment. I mean, I've handled a lot of sex abuse cases, so they're all very impactful. But you know, there's one that I'll never forget, and it taught me something very early on in my career. I literally was working out of a cubicle and didn't really know, you know, was still, you know, been practicing for like 3 months and trying to figure out, you know, what the practice of law was. And this woman came in and met with me, and I asked her what her issues were and all that. And it turns out that her daughter was getting a divorce, and her soon-to-be ex-son-in-law took all of their family Christmas decorations and wouldn't give them back. And so she's like, but I don't have any money. I said, you don't need, I'm going to get your Christmas decorations back for you. That's what we're going to do, because she was crying. She was very upset. These meant everything to her and her family. And so I wrote a letter, had a lawsuit drafted up, and ended up getting her family Christmas ornaments back. And she came to me and she gave me one. And she said, I want you to have this for your help, for what you did. And it really just touched my heart. I still have that. It's a gingerbread house, ceramic gingerbread house. And I still have that today. And it reminds me, it's not just, you know, being a trial lawyer or just being a human being, and it's about caring for people.
Yeah, and talking about 16 weeks trying cases, very stressful. I know that you leave your friends, your family, you go isolate yourself in random cities to try cases that could be going on for months. Very stressful. How do you figure out the work-life balance? And what do you do to relieve stress, and how can you give advice to people about that?
You know, I'm probably not the best person to give it because I don't have a whole lot of work-life balance. But to the extent I do, I really do try to make an effort to do something like outside of the law, whether it's charity work, going and you know, I do Bible studies a lot. You know, I spend a lot of time with children, and there's an organization called Southern Youth Sports Association that a friend of mine runs and takes care of 1,300 inner city youth kids. I spend a lot of time with them. I spend a lot of time volunteering, you know, and it just, you know, it's one of those things where it reminds you that there are other things out there, and it allows you to escape, you know, looking at depositions and getting ready for trial and doing this and doing that, you know, all the things that we have to do in our professional lives, no matter who you are, no matter whether you're a trial lawyer or anybody else. You have to try and figure out something else to remind you that it's not just about you.
Perspective.
Perspective.
Yeah.
Perspective is important. Really, I think more than perspective, I think it's self-reflection. I think you have to be able to reflect on yourself. And if you don't ever do that, if you don't ever take the time to do that, and I do it through my charity work, it always helps me reflect. You know, when I'm at the Soul Bowl, which is one of the things that I support a lot every year for the last 20 years, it reminds you of things, and you get to have fun, and you get to throw footballs with kids, and you see the joy that it brings them. Just hanging out, and it just reminds you that there's other things out there. And if you never take the time to realize that, then you are going to burn out, and you can't let yourself do that.
Have you had a time in your career where you just needed a sabbatical, you burned out, you needed to take time off, or have you plowed through the whole time?
Every I always want a sabbatical. No, it's funny. I all joking aside, no, I haven't. I really haven't. I love what I do. People ask me, I've got family members that are like, "What, Troy? When are you going to retire?" And I'm like, "I'm never going to retire. I'll die at my desk. Hopefully, I'll die at a podium in a courtrum." Because that's my happy place. But no, it's one of those things where you just no, I just love what I do. I love it. I can't imagine. Everybody always says this is not who you are. It's what you do. That's not. I'm fortunate because this is who I am. This being a lawyer, I would not know who I was if I was not a trial lawyer.
You're so lucky because you found the perfect job for you. I think many attorneys out there struggle and don't feel the same love for the profession that you do. And so I think maybe them hearing your voice and hearing you talk about the ups and downs will help them, because there had to be some times that were a little more difficult.
Oh gosh, yes. Stressful, and you want to throw your hands up, or when you get a bad ruling from a judge, and you're like, really? I spent all this time and I got this bad ruling. You just have to, once again, it's about figuring out what it is that motivates you, okay? And it can't be money. It can't be. I always tell young lawyers all the time, do good, be a good lawyer, and the money will come, okay? Don't focus on money. If you do, you're not going to be an effective lawyer. You're not going to be an effective doctor. You're not going to be an effective, anything. If all you're focused on is how much am I going to get paid? Find out what your passion is. Find out what you enjoy out of it, and then focus on that. Focus on it, because I have to do that every now and then. I have to say, I don't want to do this part of the job. So for a day, I'll just focus on the stuff that I do want to focus on, and then I'll have a fresh, approach for the stuff that I didn't want to do.
So interesting. A lot of lawyers, I'm trying to get into their heads and think how they're going to respond to things that you're saying, and they may say to you, well, marketing has become so difficult, and and this is why our business is here to help people. No one taught us in law school how to run a business, and now I'm going out on my own. I want to be a trial lawyer, but I want to follow my dreams. I can't get the cases because there's, big box firms around the country that are advertising and putting hundreds of thousands of dollars to get the clients. What would you say to lawyers that don't have a large budget about how they can get involved to get cases? And is that something you'd be open to even just mentoring people and talking about?
Absolutely. There are some of the most successful lawyers I know don't advertise. They don't. It's their reputation. It's as they get involved in their communities. Okay, that's really important too. Get involved in the community. Go to the charity. Go to all of these different events. Get involved in your community. That's important, and that is better than any advertising you can have. I understand. I think lawyer advertising has gotten almost ridiculous. It just really has. It really has. And it's ruining the profession. It's turning it more into a business and less of a profession. And I always say, being a trial lawyer is a profession, not a job. It's something that you have to care for, and it's something you have to coddle and you have to let grow, and it's got to grow inside you. And so lawyer advertising is gotten out of control. And yeah, it is difficult, and I hate seeing some of the young lawyers struggle with that, especially young law firms. And yes, I do mentor people all the time. I go around to universities, and I go to and I go to seminars, and I go to community events, and I talk about things like this. But if you care and you get involved in your community, you continue working, and you work hard, and you get good results, you're going to get the cases.
So you've seen the serious side of Troy Rafferty, the people's voice of Levin, Papantionio, and Rafferty. And now we're going to have a little fun.
Oh, I like that.
Tell us a little.
I'm a fun guy.
Yes, you are. And I have seen a very fun side of Troy, and I want the world to actually see how engaging and fun he can be as well. Sports, and that is not my forte. However, I know you're a big sports fan. Yeah. Tell us your favorite teams and why, and give us a little preview of what you think is going to happen, this season with March Madness.
All right, number one, NFL. I'm a glutton for punishment, so I've loved since I was a kid the Detroit Lions, and they have sucked for years. Okay. I mean, years. I mean, literally, I have a T-shirt at home that says Detroit Lions rebuilding since 1955. But I watch them every Sunday. I got to watch them because I like to feel bad about myself. But college, I grew up an hour outside of South Bend, Indiana. And Irish Catholic. And so my dad and my uncle and my brothers would always drive down in our station wagon and go to the Notre Dame games. We'd tailgate, and we'd try to, if you waited until right after the first quarter started, the scalpers would give you, they would darn near giving the tickets away. But if we couldn't get them, we'd go to the local bowling alley and watch the game. And so the Notre Dame Fighting Irish are my, hey, there we go. Notre Dame, all right.
You're being me talking about that, so there you go.
Look at that.
Got him a Notre Dame shirt.
Go Irish.
I did know that you were a Notre Dame fan, and I know people have wondered because you didn't go to school there.
No, I just, like I said, I grew up, Irish Catholic, an hour outside of South Bend, so you're going to be a Notre Dame fan.
To get you shooting in some of those Notre Dame shirt, in that Notre Dame shirt.
But yeah, and then, of course, I went to Michigan State, and so I followed Michigan State very closely, and I'm a big fan of Michigan State. But
do you get to the game?
From my heart. I haven't been to Michigan State. I get to Notre Dame. So great story. I got the opportunity because I was blessed. I had the opportunity on my dad's 60th birthday. I got up, this is gonna sound bougie, but we got up, back then we had I chartered a jet and got up in the morning and flew up to Kalamazoo, picked up my mom and dad, and then flew them to South Bend for the football game. And we watched the football game, and then I flew back to Kalamazoo, dropped them off, and then flew back to Pensacola. And I mean, you would have thought my dad, that was like that was the gift of a century for him. So.
Okay, wonderful. Well, that will be it right now with Troy Rafferty, the People's Voice, and Club Chair Conversations. We have another segment that you're going to enjoy where we put lawyers in the chair who are going to be candidates for the People's Voice Initiative to talk to you and ask you questions. So that will be our next segment. Join us.